Well, hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar on the circular economy. My name is Khaled Soufani, and I am at the Judge Business School in the University of Cambridge. I am a financial economist by training, so the main theme of this webinar today will include a lot of economics and reference to financial decisions. My starting point is to say that we live in a world in which there is a lot of disruptions. And when we talk about disruptions, there are some negative disruptions and there are some positive disruptions. So we can think about technology, innovation, and so on as positive. And then obviously other issues that we're experiencing right now, there are some negative disruptions. But we live in this world in which we have to think about it from so many different angles. We look at it from a scientific angle, we look at it from a business angle, we look at it from an economic angle, and so on and so forth. The issue that I will be discussing today, which is the circular economy, I'll be looking at it from an economic perspective. So a good starting point is to define economics the way academics see economics, the way economists see economics. Economics is, according to all the economists, despite the fact that they disagree with each other, but nevertheless, there is an agreement on one basic definition, and that is, it is the study of the efficient allocation of the scarce resources in response to our unlimited wants. So an important point in here, and that is economists do recognize that we have scarce resources, and we all recognize that there is unlimited wants and needs. We have needs, and of course we have wants, and there are unlimited wants. And over the years, our economy, let's say, we can say that our economies have grown and have recorded substantial growth in different parts of the world, and that is to a large extent due to consumption or overconsumption, to production or overproduction, to trade or overtrade. So when you think about economics as a framework, or when you think about economics or the economy as a structure, it is made up of decision makers, and these decision makers literally are consumers, producers or firms, governments, as well as the international sector. When we think about consumers, consumers have been consuming, as I mentioned earlier, quite a bit in every aspect, and that is where the concept of consumerism has come to light. And obviously we have the supply side of an economy where companies have been producing in order to meet the demand of the consumers. And then we have the government that formulate policies and rules and regulations. And then we have the international trade system that is there. Why am I mentioning these things? I'm mentioning these things because the process of consumption and the process of production and the process of trade tends to put a lot of pressure on the resources that we have. And when we think about resources, we think about obviously land, we think about material, we think about labor, we think about capital, we think about entrepreneurship, we think about technology. So there is a lot of demand basically, and there is pressure on the resources that are used to produce whatever we are producing in the different industries, in the different sectors. Now, if there is this pressure on the resources, the question is that, can we say that there is an unlimited resource structure that we have on our planet, given the fact that we're trying to achieve growth? Well, the answer is no. And the answer is that we do have limited resources, but of course, when it comes to the concept of the overconsumption and the overproduction and the pressure on the resources, then we do observe that there is, we have to think about the air we breathe. We have to think about the water we drink. We have to think about the soil we use to grow our food. And we have to think about the energy that we consume. Now, when we think about these resources, we can think about these resources as capital. The word capital can be applied from an economics perspective. We all know that there's financial capital. We know that there's human capital. We know that there's intellectual capital. So there are different kinds there. They're the physical capital. But all of these type of capital have for many years obviously been recognized and literally reported in financial statements and so on and so forth. But the one capital that has not been literally paid attention to, at least from a from the point of view of discussions and arguments and so on and so forth, the policy probably is our natural capital. And our natural capital literally relate to the things that is around us, the climate that we have, the forests that we have, anything, the oceans that we have, the water, and so on and so forth. And that is where we can establish a linkage between the economic decisions that we have observed taking place over the years that led to the economic growth that we've had over the years, and the demand on our natural capital. Now, the one little point that we need to make here, and that is the demand on our natural capital has created problems. The demand on our natural capital has created issues, and that relates again to the air we breathe, and that the water we drink, and the soil that we have. When you think about our oceans, we know that our oceans have become dumping grounds for plastics. When we think about the air, then obviously our consumption practices and production practices leading to the emission of CO2 into the air. When we think about the soil, there's a degradation of the soil and the fertile soil that we have. So we do have issues relate to our natural capital. And if we do have these problems, the question is that we need to ask, and that is, well, how do you deal with these problems? Do you deal with these problems from a scientific perspective? Do we deal with these problems from an operational perspective? Do we deal from this problem from a business perspective, from a policy perspective? How do we deal with these issues or challenges? Now, of course, if we are saying that the pressure on our natural capital is a result of overconsumption and overproduction, then we can see the economics in there. So one way by which we can address some of these issues and the pressures on natural capital is to try and identify solutions to these challenges from the economy. Now, what I've just mentioned here is really something relates to the concept of sustainability and the idea relating to sustainability issues. So the question that we need to ask here, our life is can we say that our life is unsustainable? Well, we do, as I mentioned earlier, there's an overexploitation of natural resources that accompanied economic and demographic growth. So there is some kind of an overexploitation of these natural resources because of, according to some people, because of the overconsumption and the overproduction. It does appear from an economics perspective that there's some kind of a market failure. A market failure meaning that, when we pay the final price to consume something, the final price takes into account what we call the private costs. So if you're a company, if you're a business, you have some direct costs, some indirect costs, some overheads, and so on and so forth. So they are taken into account when we price a product or a service that is to be sold in the market. However, one of an important cost that is not taken into account is, economists might argue and they would call them environmental costs. And the issue relating to the environmental costs are not totally reflected in the market prices. And as a result, economists might argue that there is some kind of a market failure if you don't include all the costs in there. I mean, of course, there are costs. If somebody is not claiming these costs, somebody is paying for it. And if we are saying that there are environmental costs, so there is a cost on the air, there's a cost on the water, there's a cost on the energy, there's a cost on the soil, and so on and so forth. So according to economists, there is this market failure. And then there is the issue relating to the acceleration in resource depletion. And that is where we're creating waste and pollution due to basically the product life cycle, and that is what they call planned obsolescence, for example. I don't know if you've heard this term, and that is, you know, we produce certain goods and that will probably last for a certain period of time, a short period of time, and then we will consume another version of the same thing. So, so there's this planned obsolescence. So in general, are we living unsustainably? Well, what is happening here is that there is, according to many environmentalists and sometimes, of course, policymakers and economists, that there are signs of environmental destruction and degrading of the environment in so many different ways. There's wasting, there's depletion, there's the degrading of the Earth's natural capital, and this seems to be happening at an accelerating rate. So this all relates to what we call natural capital degradation that we observe. One of the things that we would like to say is, okay, well, we can observe this issue, we can observe this problem. Well, how do we deal with it? I mean, of course, there is the overall issue relating to sustainability. So in other words, we need to create a system, a business model, an economic model that is sustainable. We need to make sure that when you think about sustainability, that we try avoiding the depletion of our natural resources in order to maintain a balanced ecosystem. That's the idea. I mean, the whole point of sustainability is to maintain a balanced ecosystem, and any disruption to this ecosystem is creating problems and challenges, regardless whether it's in the oceans or the air or the soil and so on and so forth. Now, the question is that, so what I've just explained, I explained issues relating to sustainability. But if we're going to be dealing with the challenging issues relating to sustainability, what could be one enabler, one factor that can help achieve a sustainable world? And I'm sure many of you have heard the term a circular economy. And I will talk about the circular economy. So a circular economy can be considered as one enabler to achieve sustainability. That's it. I mean, of course, there could be different enablers, which I'm not going to talk about the different enablers, but one of the enablers to achieve sustainability is to follow or adopt or explore a circular economy model. And I will talk about the circular economy, but since we're talking about the logical sequence of things that we need to consider here, sustainability could be enabled by a circular economy model, but what could enable a circular economy? One of the ways that will enable circularity is to have impact investments, investments that are targeted to achieve positive impact on the environment, positive impact to people, positive impact to society, and that's what we mean by impact investing. So there is sustainability. It's enabled, can be enabled by a circular economy. And one of the ways which you can enable a circular economy is to identify projects that will contribute positively to society as well as people. Now, living in an unsustained world, just to give a few examples, it takes 500,000 liters, according to the, some of the literature that we looked at, 500,000 liters of water in order to make 1 kilogram of gold. 8 million metric ton of plastic tends to enter the oceans every year. 8.6% of the world's population is living in extreme poverty. So this is some of the points that have been mentioned in the literature. Now, when you think about the kind of concerns that we have, what kind of concerns do we hear about, do we read about, do we hear, do we discuss, and see in front of us when we read newspapers, listen to watch TV, and so on and so forth? Well, key words come here and there relating to sustainability concerns. One is plastic pollution. Plastic pollution comes up all the time. That, there's probably, according to some of the estimates, 311 million tons of plastics produced in 2014 and is expected to double over the next 20 years. Only 14% of plastic packaging is collected for recycling. And the ocean contains more plastic in some areas than fish, according to some of the scientists. There's also the air pollution, and the air pollution worldwide, bad outdoor air caused an estimated 4.2 million premature deaths in 2016, according to the researchers. Air pollution has been linked to higher rates of diseases in general. There's also the question of water shortages. Approximately 3 billion liters of water is lost through the leakage, through leakages every day. The projections suggest that if no action is taken to reduce demand, so there's waste. If no action is taken to reduce demand and increase supply of water, most areas will not meet demand by 2050, according to the scientists who are studying this aspect. Climate change, and this is another thing that we discuss and we see. The greenhouse gas concentration reached very high levels, direct economic losses from disasters, climate disasters, and so on. And then there's also biodiversity, vitamin deficiency in some species of fish and birds, which is linked to population decline, deep water fishing damages, marine environments and catches, and so on. So what I'm sharing with you here are some of the sustainability, the global sustainability concerns that we do see being discussed and observe that are being discussed everywhere. Plastic pollutions, water shortages, air pollution, and things relating to climate change, as well as biodiversity. Now, there is something called ESG, and this is a term that is becoming very popular to discuss in business circles, in economic circles, policy circles, academic circles, and so on. And ESG, which relates to environmental, social, and governance. Environmental is relating to the things that I've just mentioned, climate change, resource depletion, waste, pollution. The social aspect, we're talking about poverty, we're talking about employment, talking about the human rights and a whole range of other things. When we talk about governance, you're talking about, well, how governance in companies are being done, boards, issues relating to taxes, executive pay, corruption, and so on and so forth. So ESG, what I'm saying here is that the ESG is basically a term that encompasses environmental, social, and governance. Now, there is another term which relates to what we call to Sustainable Development Goals, the SDG. And the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which were developed by the United Nations, and there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and they are the world's suggested best plan to build a better world. So that according to this SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, what's the idea and what's the objective of that is to try and identify, what are the kind of things that will help us build a better world for people and our planet. And a call for action by all countries, poor, rich, middle income, to promote prosperity while protecting the environment. So in other words, okay, well, yes, economics is great, consumption is fine, production is fine, trade is fine, but please think about the environment and the societies in general. And what you will see basically here is that it is, you think about the Sustainable Development Goals, and there are the 17 of them, about poverty, zero hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, clean water, clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry innovation, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace and justice, and strong institutions, and in addition to that, partnership for these goals. So these are the goals that are basically identified by the United Nations as important goals to achieve in order to have and build a better world. So but these goals, what we see, if we summarize these goals, we are talking about people, we're talking about the planet. We are obviously talking about prosperity, we're talking about peace, we're talking about partnership. These are the clear SDG, literally trying to stimulate action in these areas as we move forward. Now, why, so these are the issues that what we're trying to achieve. And we're trying to achieve these issues in order to deal with sustainability challenges. And I already mentioned these sustainability challenges, and I identified what kind of sustainability concerns that would be there. Now, remember, if you were the first slide that I mentioned, there's sustainability, there's a circular economy, and then there is impact investments. So having mentioned and talked about sustainability targets and sustainability issues and sustainability concerns, why does a circular economy matter? Why circular economy matters? What's the point? Well, and I'll define the circular economy in a minute, but we need to understand why a circular economy matter. Around 90 billion tons of natural resources are extracted every year to support the global economy. 90 billion tons of natural resources, according to the World Economic Forum and the Global Footprint Network. 90 billion tons of natural resources are extracted every year to support the global economy. Based on current trends, then that number is expected to more than double by 2050. Currently, about 9% of resources find their way back into products, and 91% they end up in landfills and the oceans. You know, not everything is being reused, repurposed, recycled, and so on and so forth. So in a way, a circular economy, you know, when you think about a circular economy, the idea has been gaining a lot of attention in both business and academia, as well as political discussions. I mean, this is unsurprising, because what we have, what can we compare the circular economy to? We compare the circular economy to the linear economy that we have been living, and that is to extract resources, to make something out of the extracted resources, to distribute the final product, a consumption takes place, and then the disposing of the final product once it has been utilized and used. So there is a linear model of extract, make, and dispose of. So it is estimated in Europe that 90% of the raw materials used in manufacturing becomes waste before even the product leaves the factory, according to some studies in there. I mean, one of the things that we would like to think about is that, you know, the issue with regards to sustainability and resource consumption, there is resource scarcity, which is a real problem. And the non-profit group Forum of the Future estimates that we are consuming 50% faster that can be replaced. And some have argued, you know, it is not my research, but some have argued that by 2030, our demands, and 10 years from now, our demand will require a lot of natural resources, which could, according to these people would be equal to 2 planets. And by 2050 is going to be even more than that. So if we are talking about this, then the question is that what would be a good place to start? Now, when we look at, take for example, the European situation, and we ask a very simple question, and that is, what is the percentage of the food wasted in the value chain? 31%. What is the amount of edible mass of fruits and vegetables that is lost? 46%. What is the original value of steel that is lost after the first use recycling? 30%. What is the original value of the PET, the cardboard, or plastics, and so on and so forth, that is lost after, you know, that is lost and not used, especially after the first use? I mean, you're talking about 60 or 70%. Cars parked that are not used. How often do we use our cars? I mean, of course, 90% of the time, our cars are parked. You know, when we are at home, obviously the car is parked. When we are at work, the car is parked, and so on and so forth. So 92% of the time, cars are parked. And then when you think about office space that is not used during office hours, you know, but that is not used is about 60%. So all of these numbers tell us that there is a lot of waste, right? There is, you know, there is a lot of waste in that respect. So all of these numbers are showing that there is waste in the transactions that we follow, in the transactions that we do, and so on. So a circular economy becomes an important model to deal with waste. That's the idea. A circular economy is about trying to make sure that we reuse, repurpose, recycle, regenerate whatever that we have consumed. A circular economy is a model that attempts to literally create capital out of waste. Can we create capital out of waste? That is, to a large extent, is an important question that we need to ask with regard to circularity. So when you see the linear model that I've just mentioned and talked about, what we see is that resource extraction is a linear model, then production, then distribution, and then consumption, and then waste. If you follow such a linear model, economic model, that achieves growth, when you get to the point of waste, where do we waste our whatever we've consumed, our goods that where are they wasted? They're thrown in landfills, they're thrown in the ocean. And the idea of a circular economy is to try as much as possible to reduce waste and bring it back into the system where it could be used by the company that originally produced this product, or if the company that produced this product is not going to be reusing whatever that could have been wasted, then other companies in the system or other industries or sectors can, in fact, benefit from that. I would like to mention that much of the great work that has been done on the circular economy was done by, a number of organizations, but the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has done a great work on circularity in general. So the circular economy model is a disruptive, innovative economic model. Despite the fact that we are thinking about reducing waste and reusing, repurposing, redesigning, remanufacturing, but that involves a lot of innovation. So by using a circular economy model, we are actually fostering and enhancing innovation in general. So it is not a replacement of innovative ideas that can be that there is a concern that it'll go somewhere else. No, it is an innovative model. One has to think about, well, what do you use? How much do you use out of the material that could have been wasted, and what do you put back into the system? It is disruptive because it changes the incumbent model. Of course, it is disruptive, but hopefully it will be disruptive in a positive way, not in a negative way. So literally, a circular economy model is about trying to use as few resources as possible. That's the idea. For as long, when we think about circularity, what are we saying here? We're trying to use as few resources as possible for as long as possible. And that's the idea. As few resources for as long as possible. Reuse as much of the components as possible. So there is this word of being, was it possible or is it not? Reuse as much of the components as possible. Extract as much value from these resources. So make sure that is there value in the resource or the wasted material, and then recover and regenerate the material, the product at the end of the useful life, if possible, right? So there are challenges to this, and as I said, if you look at it, this is a nice definition of what the circularity is, and that is if you use as few resources as possible for as long as possible, and reuse the material, extract value, and so on and so forth. So, in general, the impact of a circular economy. One of the things that it can be looked at, we can look at the circularity in the supply chain. We can look at circularity in the company. We can look at circularity from an individual perspective. We can look at circularity from a company's perspective, and we can look at circularity from a policy perspective. There are so many different ways by which we can look at circularity. So if we have at a glance, a look at a circular economy, what you see here is that when raw material come into the manufacturing process, And whatever is manufactured then is going to be distributed, it's going to be used, it's going to be disposed of. Then the issue is about reusing, recycling, redistributing, remanufacturing, and make sure that our disposable, the issue of disposing these materials are taken care of in an efficient, effective way. So circular economy is basically moving the model from a cradle to grave, that is take, make, and dispose of, to cradle to cradle. So in other words, bring it back into the system and ensure that this is the case. Circular economy would involve a number of things. It would involve reducing dependencies on scarce natural resources. That's what we see, and it is very consistent with sustainability objectives. If we reduce our dependencies on the scarce natural resources, this literally contributes positively to achieving sustainability targets. And circular economy could also mean to allow companies to generate revenue from waste. So can you create capital out of waste? So here we go. This is a business you can create. One can create a business model whereby companies can benefit from, and by the way, and circular economy, I mean, a lot of people might say, well, it doesn't work in this industry. It works in that. It is true. In some, it will work in some industries. In other industries, we might find it difficult to have. But nevertheless, a decision has to be made with regard to the overutilization of the resources. A circular economy, in addition to that, is about creating more innovative, responsive, and customer-centric products and services. And it is expected that the concept of circularity is going to become worth trillions of dollars moving forward. Especially if there is competition for natural resources, competition for materials, competition for components, and so on and so forth. So it is not a bad idea to explore the model of circularity in there. I mean, this is just like a nice infographic that indicates, well, in the living system, we have been, living systems have been around for millions of years, and obviously they will be around. Now, what we have in our system, in that living system, there are no landfills, right? In our living system, instead, one species waste, according to the research that is done, becomes another species' food. Energy is provided by the sun. Things tend to grow, and then they develop, and then they mature, and then they go through, and then they die, and then nutrition will go back to the soil. So in the natural system, in the living system, we already have a circular economic model in the natural system. So the question is that if we look at this biological material system that exists, there is already in our ecosystem a circular model. The question is that how can we learn from our environment? How can we learn from our living system? And how can then we apply what we learn from our environment and what we see around us to apply it to our technical material system? And where can we enhance this and see how it can be applied? So the circular economy bases, there are 5 fundamental characteristics relating to circularity. And that is, what are the basic characteristics? Now, according to the research that was done by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, it is about designing out waste, building resilience through diversity, using energy from renewable resources, think in systems, and in addition to that, think in cascades. So this is basically what a circular economy is. What we need to ask ourselves is a very simple question, and that why should we care about the circular economy? Well, because we're wasting too much resources and too many resources. In addition to that, what we see is that technology in itself is insufficient to resolve reliance on our natural system, and also to produce better and a better economic outcome. So if we are going to be thinking along these lines, we need to come up with investment decisions that will address what we call the 3 Ps: people and society, the planet, and profit. So a combination, and that is where we say impact investment could be an enabler for circularity. That it has to be good investments, impactful, and that will be something that will have an impact on the society in a positive way as well as the environment. So I think I will stop here in terms of the presentation about sustainability and a circular economy and impact investment. And I'll be very happy to take few questions if that's okay. Just in the interest of time. Okay. Can I invite questions? And if you have any. How can we monetize the environmental costs of rare earth, etc., that are used to produce modern technology? If this cost is added to the price of what is produced, who should receive this premium? Why is so little plastic incinerated? That's a very, very good question. I mean, you know, and I can say that when you think about monetizing environmental cost of the rare earth, it is not an easy situation. I think there has to be a combination of government policies that incentivize that, and there has to be some form of a partnership. You can call it a public-private sector partnership to try and monetize a model. In some cases, by the way, I'm like, you know, some companies would say, well, we are already doing something relating to circularity, but we don't necessarily call it circularity, and we're monetizing it because it is efficient. It is effective. However, we have seen that in other industries, this model doesn't work very well because it is a model that is proved to be costly. But that is where policymakers have to try and find the right balance. The question of monetization is very, very critical in that. Well, technology should help. Another aspect is that there's something called circularity by design. One of the things that companies are considering, and I know of some companies that are going into that, they call it circularity by design. So right from the beginning, right from the drawing board, they are including and incorporating circularity models and their circularity concepts in there. I'm going to say, for example, in the furniture business. In the furniture business, there are companies that say, okay, well, you can build up a furniture in a way where you're going to be bringing it back at the end of its life. There's, in addition to that, there's a concept of, well, how can you monetize, for example, issues relating to the rare earth elements, for example. Now, this is something to do with technology. I think that would be very specific to the company that needs the specific kind of material that they want to manufacture, let's say, for example, batteries, right? And we're talking about lithium, for example, magnetic material, and so on and so forth. Now, that is where one has to be as innovative as possible. Who should receive this premium? Well, I mean, as I said, I'm like, you know, the question of making sure that whoever is involved in the production process, with the help of the government policies, should be in that position. Why is so little plastic incinerated? That's a very good question. This is a question that we're asking. But if you incinerate plastic, what can you get out of it? I mean, of course, we are working on a plastic project right now here in the University of Cambridge. And the scientists are working on ways by which they can turn these plastics into some kind of a very useful material, and especially when it comes to hydrogen and so on. So why is so little plastic incinerated? This is one of the questions that we are asking. Is it a cost? Is it a mindset? Is it a behavior? So it could be a number of things. Another question that I see: how do you cost effect such as climate refugees? I'm like, I mean, that's another thing. I'm like, if you can start observing people moving away from very hot areas. So where do we? Who's going to be literally involved in dealing with these issues? Would it be the richer economies, the richer countries, the United Nations, international organization. This is something that is being addressed as we move forward, and we are continuously asking these kind of questions. I mean, for example, a concrete example of a current functional CE instance example. I mean, there's a number of things. One of it is office furniture, for example, furniture in general, that they're reusing, reutilizing, remanufacturing. When we think about a circular economy, by the way, it is not, you know, a lot of the questions are coming in the form of recycling. A circular economy literally apply to a number of things. One, if you want to, a circular economy is about what we call the resolve framework. Resolve, they call it. RE is remanufacturing. S is for sharing. L is for the loop. O is optimization. And then you have issues relating, V is virtualization. So a very classic example of a circular economy is what we're doing right now. Virtualization. Digital transformation is part of a circular economy. Why? Because we are reducing waste, and that is the hours that we spend commuting between A and B. And we are reducing the demand on transportation in general. So digitization and digital transformation is part of circularity. Sharing economy is part of circularity. Airbnb, for example. Uber is another example of circular economy concept. So there are plenty in there as concrete examples. I hope that addresses some of the things. How does one identify where to invest in an impactful manner? Well, I mean, there's a lot of interest in impact investments, and we're beginning to see funds that are coming out in different areas where impact investment is becoming an asset class. Now, the question is that, can we say that it is generating a higher return than the usual investments? The answer is probably no. I don't, you know, you know, we can't, so can we say that an impactful investment is generating 5–10% more than the market? Well, it is still being studied, but I don't think so at this stage. So if one wants to go for impact investments, it's because there is demand for them. And one of the things that we have observed, and that is when you think about impactful investments, we're talking about the millennials. The millennials, you know, as part of our demography, the millennials are very environmentally aware, and they are driving some of the demands to be environmentally friendly. Now they are picking up products and services that have taken into account the environment per se. So there are examples out there, but the question is that which specific impact investment is going to be going for. There are specialists in the financial market that are going for impact investments, but one, of course, has to look at the risk-return characteristics, just like any kind of investment. What are the best initial steps that policymakers can take to incentivize moves towards a circular economy? I mean, policymakers have already started incentivizing circular economy. I mean, we in the UK are you know, we are definitely thinking about it very, very seriously. In the EU, there is a big initiative which was a flagship in 2015 about circularity. There are grants probably and issues relating to startups and businesses that are thinking about the circular economy as a business model. But please remember, a circular economy is not only about recycling. That's very, very important to understand. A circular economy is not only about recycling. It is not only recycling. In fact, recycling is only one part of it. I mean, when you think about a circular economy, you have large companies that tend to remanufacture their engines. You know, companies that do remanufacture their engines. Companies don't even sell you the component or the engine itself, but what they do as companies, they sell you the service. a circular economy, as I said earlier, it could be the sharing economy as well. You know, if you're sharing assets, it's part of circularity because you're not placing too much demand on so many other things. But virtualization, reducing the carbon footprint, it is part of circularity. So a circular economy is a bigger picture than just recycling. Could a carbon tax play a role in promoting a circular economy? It could, but it is not enough. I don't think it is sufficient. I think there should be incentives and companies themselves, as well as consumers, have to realize and recognize that this is a positive thing. So there is a behavioral issue in there, and companies need to understand that. So it is not only about a tax. I mean, if you're talking about taxation, one can consider, for example, tax incentives to companies that are going circular. That's from a policy perspective. So that could be. But I believe, as an economist, believe in incentives. I think incentives should be created, but incentives should be discovered as well by the individual company, and find out there are many companies out there that have decided to go circular. Now, whether it's 100% circular or 90% circular or 50% circular, well, that's different. I mean, you know, some companies are 50% circular, depending on what you take into account. Would you consider, as a question, that establishing a circular economy in developing countries is more complicated than in developed economies? Well, I mean, this is a very good. I mean, all of the questions. Thank you very much for asking these brilliant questions, and that's fantastic. And I can see the interest in this subject. Now, with regard to developing economies, and probably in some parts of the world, we probably need to learn from developing economies, because the lack of resources is pushing these economies to become circular. You know, many economies that are developing economies and poorer economies literally consider circular economic practices simply because there is a shortage of material, because they don't have the purchasing power. So I think we should all learn from each other, and the circular economy is something that exists in both developed as well as developing economies. We hear companies talking of their credentials, but it would be good to hear an academic perspective. Which companies come to mind when you think of leaders in circular behavior? I mean, many companies will claim that they're adopting some kind of a circular behavior. In the food business, for example, some companies might say we are reducing the amount of waste that is there. In the airline manufacturing business, the argument is that they might say, well, we don't, you know, the engines are not sold, but the thrust is sold, the service is sold. So there are quite a bit of companies, and I would suggest, and I would leave it to you, I mean, and obviously we only have 1 hour, or sorry, less than an hour to discuss this issue, but I would leave it that, you know, just please go and visit the literature and identify which of the companies that have considered themselves as circular. I mean, I don't want to mention the companies per se specifically, because as academics, we need to do research and we need to have the evidence to say. So we can't say that one is 100% circular or one is 50% circular or so on and so forth. So this is something, this is the kind of thing that I would like to mention for today. I really appreciate the fact that you have asked some of these wonderful questions. One thing that I would like to say is that we still don't know much, but the little we know is very significant, okay? You know, we don't have the answers to all these challenges. We don't have the answers to all of these problems, but the little that we have developed over the past few years, I think is very, very significant to build on. We are doing a lot of research, and in the University of Cambridge, and with Cambridge Zero, of course, and the kind of projects that we're working on, we are doing a lot of interesting stuff that we are learning day after day about how to deal with some of these challenges. one example that I can give you is that I'm working on a project relating to how IoT, the Internet of Things, can enable circularity. I mean, for example, one of the things that you might think is that when it comes to electricity, there's a demand for electricity and there's supply for electricity. We have found, for example, in general, that a supply-driven model in electricity creates waste. However, when we have demand-driven models, then we have minimal waste. So this is one industry. And there's a whole range of different things. So if you have these little gadgets that measures the demand for electricity or whatever, even for fuel, even for food, you know, whatever we're thinking about here is still subject to further studies, further research, further analysis. But one thing that is a very interesting thing that we're doing is the role of the Internet of Things in enabling circularity. Okay, well, on this note, I would like to thank you all for listening to me about the circular economy and for being part of the festival that is organized by the University of Cambridge. So thank you very much again, and all the best. Thank you very much.